Welcome to Modern Aikidoist Podcast. My sincere thanks to listeners and those who have liked, subscribed, and commented. Your interest is noticed and deeply appreciated. After my interview with Lenny Sly sensei, Jaime Calderon sensei contacted me about it. He is a current direct student of Steven Seagal and wanted to correct some information provided. This interview is to give equal airtime to him in an effort to find out what is true and what is rumor. Enjoy the interview. Okay, I'm talking with Jaime Calderon sensei. He's coming on to clarify some of his perspective on some of the same questions that I asked Lenny Sly sensei about Tenshin Aikido and Steven Seagal. And thank you, sensei, for joining us and providing your perspective on those topics. Maybe I could have you start with a little introduction for people that may not be familiar with you and a bit of your background, and can kind of go from there.
Sure, that'd be great. Well, thank you, and thank you for having me on this. I really appreciate it. A little bit about my background. I started Aikido. I've been in Aikido for about 26 years now, and for most of all that time, I have been with Taka Sensei, or Steven Seagal Sensei, and I didn't necessarily start with him, meaning that was the direct person I was with. I trained in the beginning for a couple of months under a guy over here up north in Northern California for a few months, Howard Stamatz. He was a fourth dan, I believe. And then right after that, actually at the same time, I started training under Larry Reynosa. And we traveled down there quite a bit. Actually, I was training with his top two students, the Green brothers, Jeff and Garrett Green, and I would go with them to their house and stay down in Ventura and train with them. And because of that, I had, pretty direct access to be able to go when all of they went to train with Steven Seagal Sensei. Most of the time was at his house, and then it was at a lot of seminars and such.
How long were you under Reynosa sensei before crossing paths with Steven Seagal sensei?
Well, I was very fortunate because, right away, that we had a seminar, and so I got to meet him. Steven Seagal, I was able to meet him and see his technique and what he was doing, up close. And then I was able to do that a little bit more regularly because of our group, and we would get together with Tenshin Dojo with Matsuoka and Makoto Dojo. We'd all get together, and then we would train. It was in 2001 was when I left Larry Reynosa and went directly with Steven Seagal Sensei. I just trained with him personally a lot of times one-on-one, and there's other times where I'd bring my students down, and we would also have black belt testings as well.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So I know that you contacted me after hearing the interview that I had with Lenny Sly, and you had some statements about some of the things that he had said, and so I wanted to pose the same
Yeah.
questions to you as I did to him, to clarify anything that maybe he was mistaken about or you have other information about, so we can we'll
Yeah.
just kind of go from the top. And I guess the first one was, what are some of the commonly held beliefs that people tend to have about Seagal Sensei which are not accurate, or that are perhaps mistaken? One of the first ones was that he was the first non-Japanese that was allowed to open a dojo in Japan. Do you have some insight to that?
Correct. There's, other non-Japanese people in Japan, obviously training in Osaka and in Japan. But, he in the early days was one of the main guys to be able to do that. And it was in Osaka that he did that. And, and the other thing with that, and this is what was always confusing, is for people that he his name, his actually Tenshin name, which was his name, was given to him by Dukuchi Naohi, who was actually O Sensei's teacher, gave him that name, and it was only given to him. And he would use that name in his ex-wife's dojo back then. And it wasn't, I know Lenny had said that her father ran the dojo or did something like that, and he was never even in the picture. He died, I think, shortly after the war, and I don't think his Seagal's ex-wife even really got to know him apparently. And everything I say is directly from Steven Seagal Sensei. I've spoke to him about this, and he gives me permission to say anything I need to say on his behalf on this interview.
Okay. I think the way that he had explained it was that Seagal kind of inherited, it was the practicing in that dojo and kind of inherited running it,
Correct.
and that is correct. Okay,
Correct.
very cool. And what you referred to as the name that Seagal was granted.
Tenshin.
The name Tenshin Dojo. Okay, I understand.
Yeah, Tenshin is his name. And, so many people try to claim that, like, obviously Lenny's been trying to claim that's his and that he's rebranding that. And Sensei branded this years ago. And this is his name. And, a lot of people are using that shouldn't be using that name.
Sure, sure. So are there other things that are, I guess, widely held or understood about Seagal Sensei that are not accurate that you can think of or that came to mind as you listened to the interview before?
When I listened to that interview, it was right at that time you posted, and that was the last time. I probably should have
sure.
listened to it again to, maybe if you can refresh my memory on anything that you had questions about that were, you weren't too sure about.
Okay. Well, I guess with the name Tenshin, the thing that I did not understand, and I don't have a Tenshin background or really know much about it. I'm in the Midwest, and so have not really even crossed paths with anybody firsthand from the Tenshin background. So I kind of went in just curious and wanting to understand a little bit more about it. One of the things that I do recall him saying is that although the dojo itself was called Tenshin Dojo, that is where the name Tenshin came from. And he did say that it was his understanding that Seagal never referred to his Aikido as Tenshin Aikido. He just referred to his Aikido as Aikido, but from the Tenshin Dojo. And so I think that's the same word being used in kind of those two different contexts could be, I guess, kind of confusing over like who owns the name Tenshin. Is it Tenshin Dojo or Tenshin Aikido? You know what I'm saying?
Well, it's Tenshin. I mean, it was Tenshin Dojo because that's a place where they train, and because of that, you can look at his. If you say, well, what style do you do? Well, that was Tenshin style. I mean, he did Aikikai, but everyone has their interpretation of Aikido. And since his name was Tenshin Dojo, or the Tenshin name, that was his name, and he's the one that made that famous. I mean, if you look at Tenshin now, over in Japan, it's nowhere even near, even looks like Steven Seagal's Aikido, not even close. So, the Tenshin name was branded by Steven Seagal Sensei, and he's the only one that basically has that right to really use that. And like I said, so many people are claiming that they know, like Lenny's in this interview, there's a lot of things that he said that just weren't true, weren't accurate at all. And maybe he heard that from someone who heard it from someone who heard it from someone. You know what I'm saying? Everything I tell you is directly from Steven Seagal.
Okay. Well, one of the questions that I did ask him was, and he went into some detail about this, and I do recall him saying things like, well, this is what I was told, or this is what I'd heard. He wanted to be very clear about what he knew personally from firsthand experience versus what he had been told. So I think you could be right.
Sure.
That I mean, because that's how the martial arts world works. There's a lot of rumor and story, and even about Sensei, things that are told about him that was completely false. So these things can happen.
Well, I think, he's coming from his perspective of what somebody told him that had nothing to do with Steven Seagal, or maybe they did.
Sure.
But, if you want to know something, you have to talk to him about that. And Lenny's never met Seagal. He's never trained with Seagal. He's never trained with none of us. So, quite frankly, he's not even Tenshin. And you know what I'm saying? So, I think the only people who can be that are the people, one, Steven Seagal Sensei is one. I mean, that's his name. He's the founder of that. And then two, any of his close students now, any of them in the past are no longer that, because obviously they don't train with him no more. They do their own thing. So they're not even Tenshin. It's only his current students today, which there are only a few of us.
Mm. Yeah, that was a question that I asked a little later on, but I suppose we can kind of jumble the order and I can ask it now, and that is the state of what Tenshin Aikido is today. Like, are there instructors that are currently teaching it? The impression that I got, and I could be mistaken, that there was a time
Hmm.
back in the 90s where it was a pretty active and robust practice group and dojo with,
Of
you know,
course.
a lot of, it was much bigger. And then since the since the movie career with Seagal took off, seems like he sort of drifted into that profession, and then, you know, it's kind of a few others. But in doing so, that dojo seemed to have shrunk, and the instructors kind of split off and started kind of doing their own thing. And given the way that you described it, they no longer, whether they had relationship with Seagal or not, really had the Tenshin lineage. It kind of ended, and then they sort of did their own thing. How would you describe that?
Well, this is how I see that. I've been with him for a long time, and I stuck with him for a long time. I continued training. And what I see is, it gets to a point, some people, they leave for their own reasons. And most of the time they always blame that person or why they left. Um, but I've seen a lot of the people who were with him and they left, they just quit for their own reasons. They gave up, whatever that was. And the unfortunate part was, let's say, like people like Larry Reyes or Matsuoka. So you have these guys who would bring in students, and these students, became students of Larry Reyes, and so they say, oh, well, we're Tenshin, you know, or Matsuoka, oh, now we're Tenshin. And then they still stick around and they're calling themselves Tenshin. And they say, well, I've been learning this for, 15, 16, 17, 18 years. I said, well, how are you learning this? Well, I've been, been training. Well, who do you train with? Steven Seagal? And say, no, well, I trained with, either Matsuoka or some offshoot of him or Larry Reyes or some offshoot of them. And that's what I've been doing. And I'm like, that's not Tenshin. You've never trained with. I mean, Steven Sensei told me this. He said, look, there's so many people using my name, which is true. They maybe train with him for a few hours, or they train with him at a seminar, or they train with somebody who trained with him a couple of times. That does not make them Tenshin. That does not make them a student of Steven Seagal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go to a lot of places. I mean, I'm very fortunate to be able to travel around the world and teach on behalf of Steven Seagal, and I run into people who claim they do Tenshin. I watch their Aikido, and it's like, what the heck is this? I mean, I even look at Lenny, and I was like, what is that? That's his Aikido, because there's a lot of things in his Aikido that is not Tenshin, and there's a lot of basics that he's lacking, and so, and that's only because he's never trained with the master, with Steven Seagal Sensei, and it's one thing watching his videos or watching my videos, and it's another training with him personally. It's, and a lot of people are doing that, and it's kind of frustrating,
Sure.
because they're really degrading the name, and they're really degrading what Sensei is trying to get across and what he's teaching. And I see it, and it's like it's just, yeah, it needs to stop.
A question that leaps to mind as you describe that is, do you know? I'm sure you probably do know. How long did Larry Reynosa train under Steven Seagal when he was with him? Do you know?
I don't know exactly when he first started. I would have to say, it was in the mid 80s.
Mm-hmm.
He started somewhere around the mid 80s, and he stopped in 2001.
So that's a pretty long time.
Yeah, from 80,
Okay.
yeah, I don't know, mid 80s to 2001 is when he left.
Okay.
I mean, I know that because I know when he left, because I was one of the first persons he called and told me he was leaving.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, so he told me he was leaving, and I was just saying to myself, great, because for years, I just didn't want to be with him. I mean, it's not, I just, I he does his Aikido the way he does it very well, but it's very different than Steven Seagal Sensei's Aikido.
Mm.
And I started to see that as I got to be able to train with Steven Seagal Sensei more, get to see him, I started thinking, well, there's a big difference here.
Mm-hmm.
And I started doing more of Steven Seagal Sensei's Aikido, which kind of made a little bit of a conflict between me and Larry a little bit, because he would always say, no, this is how you do it. I'm thinking, this is how Sensei did it. It's not, this is what we're doing. And so I just started just doing what Seagal Sensei was doing. And then my black belt test, I totally did everything that Sensei Seagal wanted to see, his style, and I did very well because of that.
Hmm.
You know, so and that was hard. I mean, because I trained with Larry Reyes for a very, very long time. I built a really strong relationship. But for me, it's like I want to learn from the best. And all Larry Reyes was a student. You know, Matsuoka was just a student. So if you want to learn from the best, you can learn from the master. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And so, and sometimes that's hard to do because you don't want to cross lines and this and that. But ultimately, you gotta search for the best.
Sure. Well, a question that also comes to mind too is that, if Reynosa was under Seagal for doing the rough math, 15, 17 years, something like that, and I guess this would come to a branding question. If during that time he was teaching Tenshin Aikido and then he leaves and suddenly stops, like, are his students that were under him Tenshin Aikido and then they were not? But it seemed like that would be a long enough time where a student could come from, raw day one and be learning Aikido for 5-10 years and say, well, today I'm Tenshin Aikido and tomorrow I'm not. Pardon me, I'm not anymore.
Yeah.
That would be kind of I guess it's just a branding and a brand that changes as someone comes up under a system or an instructor.
Well,
and
you
then
have to remember
switches.
too, it's an interpretation of interpretation. So, when I looked, a little bit about my background, I played a lot of basketball. I mean, I was very fortunate to be on the USA team. I went to New Zealand and Denmark, and the one thing I was very, very good at, and I didn't realize this until later on in my life, is I was very good at being able to see something as it is and be able to do it. So many people look at something and then they say, oh, it was like this, like that. I'm like, what were you watching? They like just over exaggerated. I'm like, oh my God. And that always puzzled me. And so when I got with Sensei, when I got first with Larry Reynosa Sensei, and then I got with Seagal, I started seeing huge differences. And, Larry Reynosa is doing his own thing. I guess his interpretation, whatever that was. And it definitely wasn't Steven Seagal's Aikido. In the beginning, it looked like it because I was very beginner in what I saw, what I understood.
So it looks similar.
And then as I got better, it looked similar. But as I got better and I got to train with Steven Seagal more, I got to see that there was a big difference, And so if you look at Larry Reynosa's students, who are they going to follow? They're going to follow Larry Reynosa. You see what I'm saying? They want so much Seagal because they're around him more. And that's what I saw. I mean, it's not to say that their Aikido was bad. I had some amazing training with these guys. I mean, it was some very, very tough training. I mean, it was awesome. But when we're looking at technical aspects, it was very different than Steven Seagal's. It was very different.
Okay.
And I didn't really realize that until later on when I got to train with him personally. When I left Reynosa, and I got to be able to train with Seagal just one-on-one, and I did that several times. I mean, basically, in the first lesson that he gave me one-on-one was like, it totally was more than I had with Larry Reynosa in however many years I was with him. I mean, not to say that stop saying anything bad about that. It's just that I got to see so much more up close and personal that there's so much clarification.
Okay.
And I was very fortunate I lived here in California. I mean, I was like, a 6-hour drive. And there was times where I would drive from Northern California all the way down to LA, train with Sensei for a couple of hours and then drive back. I did that several times. And then there's other times where I stayed the night at friends or whatever, and then I would bring some guys down. But I tried to see him as much as possible.
Sure. And I want to cover some of the questions, and actually I think this relates to what you just talked about, and that the question was, do you feel that Steven Seagal was an innovator in Aikido, or that he was reflecting a harder style of Aikido that he was actually taught? And the related question of who was his instructor. And so I know Lenny had his answer, but maybe you could provide some insight there.
Well, Sensei had a lot of teachers. You know, it just wasn't one teacher. He had a lot of teachers. And from what he told me personally is, you know, he started actually with Kung Fu. I mean, way before he did Aikido and Karate, and then he got into Aikido. But he took all the most effective, practical techniques from Kung Fu, Karate, from the sword, and he brought that into his Aikido, and that's where his Aikido came from. You know, and obviously I'm sure he has influences from other teachers. I think all of that together is what you saw him do. You know, even today, you know, I was just with him in Russia, and you know, we talked a lot about he talked a lot about the sword and a lot of different his evasions and things like that, and they're very detailed, you know. And if I don't know if you ever saw what I do, how I train. I mean, I'm the evasions I do are very, very, very detailed. It takes years and years and years to, I mean, you can do them and make them look okay. Like I see like everyone, I'll look at Lenny's or I'll look at other people on the East Coast at their stuff, and it's like, they're missing a lot, you know? It's because of those basics. If you do not understand those basics and you don't have those, you're not going to learn his technique. It just will not learn his technique, and I have not seen anyone that really understands his technique.
Okay. Yeah, I've about a year or two ago, I came across your channel for the first time. Maybe it's 3 years now, and I did look at some of the stuff that you were doing. In fact, I revisited them after you contacted me, and actually, one of the first videos that I saw, you actually had a shout out to Lenny you know, and I got the feeling like the two of you were friends and that you really appreciated what he was doing, and I kind of wondered if things had changed, or if your interpretation had changed, or anything like that.
You know, someone had told, one of my students told me about Lenny, and I'm like, oh, okay, you know, I think I messaged him and we started talking. He seemed like a very nice guy. We would talk, I mean, for a long time on the phone, and we had a great relationship, I thought. But then, you know, I started seeing his posts about Steven Seagal. I started seeing him talk about to people about Steven Seagal, like, you know, he's like saying all this crap about him, like, oh, he's no good anymore. You know, I'm going to be the one that's going to teach his Aikido. I'm the new sheriff in town. I'm like, what the heck is he talking about? You know, and after he started saying these comments, you know, I just said, you know what, I can't talk to him. It's just, you know, it was just very, very wrong, you know. And he knows what he's done, what he's said, and even he's told me when we first started talking, you know, he goes, drama and all this stuff that creates YouTube, that creates more subscribers, you know. And I just said, for me, I'm not going there. I'm just going to be real with who I am. I'm going to teach what I know from Taka Sensei. I'm not going to make up stuff. I'm just going to do what needs to be done, and I'm going to do it from my experience with Taka Sensei that I continue to have today. I mean, I talk to him as much as I possibly can. I messaged him earlier this morning. You know, like I said, I don't do anything without his permission.
Okay. Yeah, you know, as you told the part about you driving down and being able to spend time with Seagal Sensei and train with him, and the insights that you got working with him directly instead of with Reyes or other people, you know, the thought that occurred to me was that because Seagal is inaccessible now, I mean, unless you're in Russia, it seems like, is there an effort to try to revive Tenshin, at least in the United States, or allow some kind of accessibility? Because it seems like until that happens, like, will Tenshin be able to revitalize itself or reinvent itself or re-release itself here in the United States?
Well, basically right now what we're doing is we're trying to clean up a lot of nonsense right now with a lot of these people that are claiming his name, you know, and there's quite a few of them on the East Coast, you know, and we are working hard to do that. And another thing we have, and I think this is one of the questions, if you don't mind, that you asked me about,
Sure.
Tenshin Dojo Europe, and that's
Yes.
with Patrick Farrow Sensei, who's one of Sensei's teach students. And there's only a few of us. We're going to have a list, and this is on Sensei's request of what he's going to do is put a list of Patrick Farrow, his daughter, myself. It was there's a couple other people
Hmm.
there that are his personal. We're the senior students, and you know Tenshin Dojo Europe, which means that Patrick Farrow will run. Basically, he's I don't know if say really in charge, but he kind of runs that dojo there, and it's mainly so people know who is Steven Seagal's teacher students. I will do here in North America, South America, so people know that it's just me. There's nobody else.
Hmm.
We have another guy that's part of our dojos in St. Louis area, but for right now, it's just this is what I'm doing, and same thing with Uza, who's in Okinawa, that will do be able to support Asia, but we're all interchangeable. We just float around and support one another and what our endeavors are. And intention, I mean, I've been teaching for quite a few years, doing seminars in different countries, spreading that and helping Sensei spread what he's done and his spread his name, Tenshin, and let people know that we are Tenshin and all these other people, are not, and I get emails all the time about, oh, this person said this, they're Tenshin. I'm like, who are they? You
Hmm.
know? And so we're just trying to clean that up. And Sensei's still teaching. He's always been teaching. He may not have a dojo in the United States. He may not be training every single day back then, but we always go to his house. We would always train with him,
Hmm.
but we obviously had to go to his house to do that.
Sure. And I guess that would be my next question is, given his age and anybody who's 70 years, I think he says, what, 71, 72 years old, something like that. That's an
No,
admirable age to stay active in the martial arts. Is he training, what level is he working with the people that you mentioned and you and the other seniors within this, it's called Tenshin Dojo Europe, is that right?
yeah, Tenshin Dojo Europe,
Okay.
and then there's we have that here in the United States, in Canada, North America, South America, stuff like that. So also too, Sensei is not 70, he's 67. So
Oh, 67. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, 60.
Yeah.
So but what was your question again? Sorry.
Oh, just how much contact that, involvement that he has with training with all and he has many diverse activities. It appears that, he's got his fingers in a lot of different pies. And I think it could be easy
Yeah, he does.
to not have enough contact time with the people and the organization that he seems to want to revitalize or kind of, I should say,
Well,
build really.
he he talks to us, I mean, a lot. So, I
Mm,
mean, yeah, it's not like we talk to him like every once a year. I mean, we
okay.
get to see him. Like I saw him, I trained with him in Australia. I went with him and did a little tour over there. And then I was with him in Russia last year, with him in Russia again this year. And so I'll be going over there a little bit more often to go train. He's actually opening up a beautiful dojo over there in Moscow,
Mm,
be a Japanese style dojo to be really, really beautiful. It should be done next year, early next year, or mid
mm,
next year, so like springtime. But uh, us senior students, he's given us the authority to teach his technique.
okay.
We are responsible to be able to do that.
Is he
Um,
gathering up any of the instructors that he worked with through the 90s?
no,
None of them?
no,
Okay.
no, no. They have nothing to do with what we're doing today.
Because I know that he had a pretty strong bond with Matsuoka throughout that time. Is that right?
Yeah, no, Matsuoka's doing his own thing. He's like he has changed a lot, to what he wants to, and that's
Mm,
fine, but it's totally different than it used to be. Very much, I see it much softer,
mm,
and but it's not. I went to a seminar, one of his seminars think it was last year, early last year, and it's just, I mean, nice guy. It's just nothing I would ever want to do or teach or even
Mm.
share. I, where I grew up in the East Salinas, and I unfortunately and very fortunately had a lot of experiences there and saw a lot of bad things and been involved with things. And, I want something that works.
Mm.
I want something that I know I can teach my wife, I can teach my new baby as he gets older, and that I know is going to protect him. That's important. I mean, it's like, if I would have been in a different route in Aikido under someone else, I know I've never would have done Aikido. I would have quit and said, what, this is bull, because
Mm.
most Aikido out there is not going to work, unfortunately. You know.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that that's a common, uh, I guess, boy, a crisis of faith that a lot of Aikidoists have had more recently, as Aikido seems to have gotten softer and softer and been kind of had the heavy pacifist influence that has crept
Yeah.
into it over the last few decades at least, um, or since the 60s, I would say. But there's a lot of Aikido out there that just isn't very I don't even say very effective, but effective at all in terms of a self-defense. It's more of a moving meditation or a
Correct.
that kind of thing. So I know I'm
But
very
what
I'm very
baffles
interested.
me,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
what baffles me about that though is, I've been, like I said, I travel around the world and I do these seminars, but I go to dojos too because I want to meet new people. I go train, and
Hmm.
every single one of them I talk to, they say their Aikido works. It's practical.
Hmm.
Every single one of them.
Hmm.
And I train with them, and then they have a whole different perspective when I do that because I don't attack them like they're used to. I don't throw myself like they used to having their ukes do. And then all of a sudden they start realizing, wait, well, something's wrong. It's just maybe having a bad day or whatever. But they all believe that their Aikido is very practical and it works.
Mm. About 2 years ago, I had a student, a prospective student, call me interested in Aikido, and he said that he had called a local dojo saying that he wanted to study Aikido to defend himself, and he was told,
Mhm.
even on the phone, well, that's not what we do. If that's what you're interested in, you'll have to go somewhere else.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I was
You
shocked.
know,
I was like,
well, there is some schools that are honest like that, and will
sure,
say that.
sure.
And I mean, there's times where I've been into a dojo and that I was told that they don't do kauski, which is a punch to the face, because people have gotten hit, so they stopped doing that,
Hmm.
which really puzzled me.
That
But
is puzzling. Yeah.
it's, and I think Aikido is for everyone. Everyone, I think it's one of the best martial arts. I think it's for everyone, and everyone has, some people want it for the dance, and people want to do it for exercise. People want to do it, because it's like a family thing or something, whatever. But I do it for the practical side of that. I do it also for the spiritual side, But I think it has all these facets. I think it just depends on how you can approach it or how you're able to approach it. And if you have a good enough instructor that could um, give you what you're looking for.
I definitely agree with that. In fact, I heard a great description just recently that Aikido is a great platform to base and bring other things kind of into as you like to, whether it's
Yeah.
things like boxing or wrestling, grappling, all of those things. Aikido is just a great um, core to start with for that, and I think that's. I'd say I would agree with that. I really like Aikido as being, it's always the home that I come to when I go and cross train in other things
Yeah.
because it seems to work so well when you bring those influences together. And it does sadden me when I hear Aikidoists argue about, well, that's not Aikido, or this isn't Aikido, or whatever this you're doing is
Correct.
not Aikido. It seems like they're putting
Correct.
up this ever shrinking fence around their yard that just makes their yard smaller and smaller and smaller. And
Yeah.
it
No, I
omits
agree.
so many great things that they could have in their art that they might need to save themselves sometime. But they say, well,
Yeah.
I'm not going to practice that because that's not Aikido. And yeah,
Well, I think it really comes down to you got to find the right teacher.
yeah,
Spend a lot of time finding that right teacher that can help guide you to what you are looking for.
absolutely. I
Just don't
think
go into any. Yeah.
mentors are so valuable, and I think I've only run into one or two people ever in my life that are at such a high level that they could not benefit from having a mentor. Even if it's just to learn one aspect of one thing or some kind of a new influence. It's just a very valuable self-development thing to have.
Well, I see a lot of people that they, get to a certain level and they think that they don't need a teacher anymore. Or, I even know guys that are using Tenshin name and train with sensei a few times, and then they say, oh, well, I had all I needed to learn from him and it's time to move on. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I look at your Aikido and it's like, it's weak. It's like, you need a teacher. You need someone that can take you to that next level. And definitely if you feel that you learned all you could from Seagal, then it's like, no one's going to be able to help you because your mentality there's too much ego into that.
Right. When your cup is full, there's nothing that anybody else can put into it.
It's full. Exactly.
That's right.
And, your cup should never be full.
Exactly.
Should never be full.
Exactly. Well, this has been really great, and within your description, you actually covered most of the rest of the questions that I wanted to ask, mostly about Tenshin Dojo Europe. So is there anything else that you would like to add that you can think of that you wanted to bring up during this interview?
Well, I just think that, as I said, there's a lot of people out there that think they know Steven Seagal, and they don't. They think they know Tenshin, and they don't. And I think if they want to, then they need to contact him or contact me or any one of his senior students, but just don't use that name. Some people only train with him for a few hours, a few days, and that doesn't qualify you. I think Sensei's Aikido is very powerful. It's just amazing. I mean, you know what you've seen what he's done with that, and then to degrade it by saying you're that. I mean, you got to spend time with the guy.
Right.
I mean, he lives all the way in Russia, and I don't get to see him as much as I would like to. But when I do, we get that quality training in, to really, really dial things in and get things where they need to be, so that, if I say that I'm doing Tenshin from what I learned from Steven Seagal, then I better darn well know what the heck I'm doing, because if not, I'm disrespecting his name, disrespecting my name, my family, and so to me, I take this very, very seriously. I work really, really hard. And like I said, it just really bothers me that you get all these people talking all this crap. There's a lot of old Japanese, teachers, they would call this, they had a term for that. They called samurai kuchi. And that meant samurai mouth. All these people talking, it's all they are is this mouth, and I'm sure Lenny will be all pissed off at what I say, but that's tough, and same thing with these Brandon Needhams and all these other people like that, they have nothing to do with that name, and they have nothing to do with Steven Seagal, and, they just need to stop using his name and go find something else, do something else.
Sure.
But I just, that's his name, and he worked hard for that. And, but I don't know. I just think that right now there's a lot of change that we're going to do. I have my dojo that I'm training at here in Northern California, Sacramento area, that people want to come and learn Tenshin, they can do that. And I'm doing other stuff like I said, in other countries. And we have some other people in Europe that are doing stuff. I have a lot of students in Europe. And I have a family over there, which is through Patrick Farrow. He's doing what he's doing in France. And then I have my brother, Uza, in Okinawa.
Oh.
So he has students, we're there. And we've been basically watching a lot of people just, do their things. And we're like, okay, it's time to stop. So, but yeah, so thank you for, having me on, and I hope I clarified anything. And, if people have any problems, well, this has come straight from Steven Seagal Sensei himself. So.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you coming on, and I'm always one of those people that I would like to get more information, get right down to as accurate of information as we can, try to find the truth out. And I definitely wanted to get your perspective on it. Oh,
Well,
got some chaos happening there, it sounds like.
Oh yeah, my baby.
Oh, okay.
I had to come inside. I was getting really cold outside. I had to come inside because it was getting really, really cold.
Oh, sure.
But
well,
I just thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Thank you,
that.
Sensei, for coming on, and we'll end this podcast here. But I just want to thank you again for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
You bet. What do you think? Please share your ideas in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube, or go to the Facebook group Aikido the Martial Side and post a comment. The Spirit Aikido Online program is now live. Subscribers get access to video training and mentoring to techniques and training methods I've adopted from other martial arts to make my Aikido more practical. There is a link in the description section. I invite you to check it out. I always enjoy hearing from listeners of the show, whether through comments or questions. Thank you all for sharing your interest. Enjoy your training.